Welcome to Arcana Orbis, the secrets of the world. In this episode we will look into a few of the many claims that the top Nazis regularly used superstitious methods to decide the right course of action during the war. In particular, we shall try to see if there were some specific situations that could point to the possibility that the German War Command was using astrology to predict the future outcome of a specific action. For this video I am using first and foremost the book Hitler's Monsters from 2017 by Professor Eric Kullander. In addition, The Nazi and the Occult from 2008 by Paul Rowland and the International Encyclopedia of Secret Societies and Fraternal Orders from 1997 by Alan Axelrod. I am also using online encyclopedias, articles and videos. The latter mainly to assess how widespread this knowledge is. So, let us take a quick glance over the cultural and ideological context that was leading up to the horrible conclusion of the Nazi regime and its aspirations. It is becoming more and more clear that the underlying structures in the ideology of the Nazi Party had been heavily influenced by occultism, superstition and magic. During the 1800s, academic theories of the historical developments of the world in general, and the Aryan Indo-Europeans in particular, was twisted to accommodate the elitist, pan-Germanic and purist Aryan proponents throughout Europe, thus aiding the new ideas of a Nordic Aryan race which had been diluted by what they deemed inferior peoples, such as Jews, Slavs and Romanis. These ideas were so thoroughly and methodically pushed to the people by books, pamphlets, textbooks, speeches, films, radio and newspapers from the 1920s to the very end of the war, that the idea and the aim to exterminate whole peoples was quite easy to implement. Very early on, the party wanted to engage the young boys so that the SA could recruit them in the future. Hitlerjugend, or Hitler Youth, had its roots formed as early as 1922, and they were from a very young age indoctrinated to believe in their dominant and naturally superior race. With over 100,000 members, together with BDM, the Band of German Girls, which was the girl equivalent to the Hitler Youth, they would secure the future of the Aryan race. Among all of these ideas, there were also the thoughts of powers in the nature that the old elite Aryan race had used. Proof of this was collected by Nazi scholars sent around the world. Symbols, artifacts and writings were put together and neatly presented for the top Nazi leaders. To have all the ideas, research and teachings under one umbrella, they created the Ahnenerbe, or Ancestral Heritage, in 1935, an institute for promoting the Ur-Germanic and Aryan theories, collecting and describing artifacts and symbols like runes and inscriptions. The right-facing swastika, the Hakenkreuz, was early on motivated by the notion that it was the penultimate symbol of the sun, found all over the world, and using it would help to break with Christianity, which many Nazi leaders detested, and instead embrace the powers of the pagan mystical world. They actually planned to eradicate the Christian churches after they had won the war. Himmler who happily embraced the possibility to indoctrinate the young and the new breed of his beloved Schutzstaffel, or SS, took it to heart and began to reform the way the soldiers were to be initiated into the ranks of the SS. Here he introduced pagan rituals of marriage amongst many other rites for his SS soldiers, all with the appropriate esoteric and occult symbolism. The head of the German Society for Scientific Occultism, Fritz Quade, said that the Nazi Party was the first party to unite and put into practice occult and folkish or folk thinking, based on recognition of the material world as well as the beyond. To confirm this, we have a statement from Heinrich Himmler himself, who said, quote, "I do not consider astrology to be pure humbug, but believe that there is something behind it. We must do much more to restrict charlatans in a way that we only allow specific communities of research in this sphere." End of quote. Himmler wanted to make the occult sciences, which was now called Grenzwissenschaft, or border science by the Germans, into accepted knowledge. Consequently, in 1942, the Institute for Border Science was opened. The term border science incorporated both the occult cultism like theosophy, Ariosophy, and practices that was not accepted by science like talking to the dead, radiesthesia, clairvoyance, and astrology. When it comes to Hitler and the top Nazi leaders and their decision-making, it seems like an important factor to take into account their alleged dependency on astrology and dowsing with a pendulum when researching the tactics of the Second World War. One clear example of this is when Hitler's designated successor Rudolf Hess saw the danger with two huge front lines when the Führer planned the invasion of the Soviet Union. Hess secretly flew to Scotland to try to negotiate a peace between the British Empire and the Third Reich. He crashed the plane and was captured, and in custody he then told the interrogators that he had consulted his personal astrologer before leaving. He also said that he had been inspired to do the flight through, quote, "a dream by supernatural powers," end of quote. Another example of a top Nazi leader wanting to use divination to influence the enemy negatively comes from the diary of the Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, describing a lunch meeting with Hitler and Himmler. Quote, "The whole world is full of mystical superstition. Why shouldn't we exploit that in order to undermine the enemy front?" End of quote. Both Hitler and Himmler had been very interested in this idea, according to the diary. Encouraged, he started a psychological warfare by using horoscopes and predictions by the 16th century astrologer Nostradamus, and they used this in the invasions of Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, among others. Goebbels and several other top Nazi leaders in the war believed that their psychological warfare using these old predictions, along with newly made horoscopes, had had significant impact on the enemy fighting morale. When it comes to dowsing in the war effort, they started using a pendulum as a means to attack the enemies. In 1942, the German Navy set up a pendulum institute by orders from the Navy Intelligence Service to, quote, pinpoint the position of enemy convoys at sea by means of pendulums and other supernatural devices, so that the German submarine flotillas could be certain of sinking them." End of quote. Considering all of these facts and instances, is it possible that we have missed a vital component of the whole Nazi period and what they aspired for? Are we just beginning to realize how ingrained the people of Germany was in the occult? Is it still impossible to truly accept how deep the thoughts of a superior Aryan Germanic race really was? A race with links to the first prehistoric societies and which was predestined for world domination. All won by means of supernatural hidden forces in nature handed down to them through history. Is it possible that in famous instances like Dunkirk, when the order-giving structure seemed to have failed completely, the real reason was that everyone in the high command used their own astrologer, giving completely different outcomes? The same questions can be asked for many other strange situations in the war, like when the German army suddenly stopped when they just had reached the outskirts of Moscow in the winter of 1941. Some German soldiers actually reported they could see the buildings in the town. The fact is that Stalin had very weak defenses around the big city, and the German High Command knew this. The historically accepted accounts tells us that the halt order was due to the cold weather and that the supply lines were too far back. But could another answer to this sudden halt be that it was a horoscope-based decision? Was this really a logical behavior of an army that had pushed so extremely aggressive for many weeks towards this very moment, just to stop a few kilometers from the final goal? The same question can be asked about the start of the war. Was everything they decided really as rational as we are led to believe? They searched for enemies by using a pendulum over a map for one. They used over 300 years old predictions to psychologically subdue soldiers in the trenches, and Hitler himself said, quote, "It suffices for one prophecy to be fortuitously confirmed by subsequent events for it to be believed, cherished and handed down from generation to generation." End of quote. A final thought. Did the Allied forces ever try anything like this? Did the Russians try to use, say, mind control or distant mind reading? Did the Americans ever research these fields? Did any of them succeed?